You're about to hear something different. Not a tale from the past, but the moment a legacy begins. Welcome to a very special episode of Viking Legacy and Lore. Today, we're not analyzing myths. We're not breaking down battles. We're stepping into the storm to meet a woman you haven't heard of yet. You see, this is the beginning of a two-part trilogy. I set out to write a trilogy about the last Viking, to follow the journey of a Viking who survived Stamford Bridge and has to find his way in a world where Vikings were phased out. Most people think Vikings ceased to exist, but the truth is they merged, they blended, they shifted occupations, or they became mercenaries for the rich and powerful. As I began to write the prologue to this last Viking series, and part of what you're going to hear today is the original from that, but has now been developed. I was writing the prologue about the last Viking's mother and a brief story and explanation of where the hero came from, his bloodlines, and so on. But as her story developed, I couldn't help but think of all the adventures she could have during the final decades of the Viking Age. So, in short, she gets her own trilogy, which will also provide plenty of backstory for the last Viking when the time comes. What I'm going to share with you today is the prologue to this historical fiction trilogy that I've been crafting behind the scenes. It's a saga of birthright, identity, faith, and fire. It's deeply researched, richly imagined, and is rooted in the real Viking world that we explore on this podcast. I hope you enjoy this story. I'll be back at the end with some final thoughts and a special offer. The wind howled down the fjord, a beast let loose from the jaws of winter. It curled around the black timbers of the village, rattling doors, hissing through thatches, clawing at the eaves like a thing seeking shelter and finding none. The sea lay beyond, restless, a shifting mass of gray, dragging itself against the shore as if it might pull the land down into its depths. Foam lapped and seething, a gray mouth hungry for the cliffs. The air was thick with brine and the scent of rotting kelp, with the damp smoke curling weakly from shuttered hearths, struggling against the storm. She stood there at the edge of it all, a dark figure cloaked in salt and sorrow, her hands pressed against the swell of her belly. Feeling the child shift beneath her ribs, the weight of the journey clung to her. Salt stiff in her hair, cold in her bones, weariness settled deep in the sinew of her legs. She had come so far, over the black-backed waves, past the fjord's jagged teeth, through the bite of the northern wind, and yet now, standing in the place Leif had called home, she felt as if she had never left the sea at all, still adrift, still untethered, a ship cast onto foreign shores, but no welcome fires burned for her. No hands reached out in greeting, no voices called her name. The village lay quiet, swallowed by mist and storm, its doors shut against the night. No eyes watched from the shadows, no whispers ran ahead of her arrival. She was a ghost upon the shore, unseen, unheard, a lone traveler stepping into a world that did not know that she had come. The wind pressed at her back, urging her forward, but there was nowhere to go, only the darkened houses, the narrow winding paths slick with rain, the great looming cliffs beyond, white-veined and jagged, where the sea crashed ceaselessly below. Somewhere in the distance, a door creaked, then slammed shut. A dog howled, long and low, a mournful sound that was swallowed almost instantly by the gale. The cold pressed in, seeping through the wool of her cloak, curling its fingers into the damp folds of her dress. The child stirred again, a slow, rolling movement beneath her ribs, and she clutched her belly tighter as if she could shield it from the wind, from the storm, from the empty silence of this place. She took a step forward, then another, her boots sinking into the wet earth. No torches flickered, no voices murmured within the walls around her. Only the storm moved, howling through the empty space, filling the void with its voice. She could have turned back, could have slipped into the mist, vanished like a breath upon the wind, and no one would have ever known she had stood there at all. Leif had told her to go ahead, to take the waves before them, to ride the wind to the place that he was born, the village of his childhood, the place of his first steps, his first wounds, his first knowing of the world, before his father had torn him from it, before he was cast westward, to the ice and the stone, to the land where breath turned to frost and the sea cut like a knife. He had spoken of it in rare occasion, quiet moments, his voice low, his gaze distant, a shadow of longing curling beneath his words, a name held between his teeth like something sacred, something fragile, as if to say it too often might shatter it to dust. A place where the cliffs reared high, white against the blue-gray sky, where the sea stretched endless and waiting, where a boy had once run barefoot through the summer grass, his laughter lost in the cry of gulls. Go there, wait for me. He had said it that night, hands firm around hers, fingers calloused and cracked with the years of wind and rope, yet soft in their knowing of her, in their need of her. The battle in Iceland was upon them. The iron was singing against the whetstone, the ships groaning under the weight of men who sharpened their thirst on the promise of war. Already, the mead was thick on their tongues, their bellies restless, their voices raised in the old songs, the ones that spoke of the spear and fire and all that must be given. He had never feared it, not the breaking of bodies, nor the red mist frenzy of the fight. He had never flinched at the meeting of an axe and bone, nor had his hands ever trembled at the weight of the sword. And yet, there had been something else in him that night, something heavy in the set of his jaw, something deeper than the hunger of battle, something that made her stomach tight, a weight upon him, an unrest he couldn't shake. The firelight had twisted across his face, shadows stretching, retreating, shifting in the hollows of his cheek, and for the first time she had seen it. The quiet knowing, the thing that he would not name. He had seen too many men fall, had watched the red seep slow from the bodies he had fought beside, had stood too long in the wet churn of the battlefield, the stink of death curling into his skin. It was not dying he feared, not the cut nor the silence that might come after. It was the leaving her, leaving the child that stirred now within her, the child that carried his blood, his name, his fire, the child that might never hear his voice, never feel the rough warmth of his hands, never know the man who had set them upon this course. Find the woman who lives on the cliffs, the one who helped bring me into the world. She'll see you safe. His voice had caught them just for a breath, a moment so small that another might have missed it. But not her, never her. She had heard it, the thing beneath the words, the raw edge of something that was neither command nor plea, but both. A promise, unfulfilled, a future unwritten. He would have wed her had fate allowed it, would have spoken the words, the oaths, would have claimed her before all, before his God and men, had time not been a beast with its teeth already in them. But time had only given them this moment, only firelight and quiet hands and words that burned like runes carved deep into stone. He had kissed her then, slow, aching, as if he could leave some part of himself behind, as if he could bind himself to the child that would grow without him, the child that would walk upon the earth with his fire in its heart. And when he had pulled away, he had held her face, searching her eyes, drinking her in, as if he might never see her again, as if he knew. The moment her feet left the dock and carefully moved onto the ship's ocean-soaked deck, the bell tolled, a hollow sound, lost to the wind. The first mate moved in silence, loosening the ropes, the sail falling limp before catching the breath of the storm. The vessel drifted back into the black, slipping from the tether like a thing unmarooned from the world. She did not turn, did not watch him vanish into the dark, though she could feel his leaving, the weight of the child and his legacy pressing against her ribs. The ship and the shore were swallowed whole by the night, the dark engulfing, the sea winds separating, yet pulling them both toward the place where fate had laid its snare. The ship fading into the silence, his words still heavy in the air, heavy in her bones, heavier still with the life that moved within her. And then he was gone, and she was alone. She had felt it then, and she could feel it now, standing on the shore, an unease, a prickle at the back of her neck, the hush of the village, the weight of unseen eyes, the way the wind twisted through the gaps in the timbered walls, as if whispering warnings meant only for her. Leif was gone, and she was alone. She had no standing here, no name to claim, but the one whispered in the dark, the one that belonged to a man who was not her husband, and that she knew was a dangerous thing. The cold bit through her cloak, through her damp skirt, through the trembling in her limbs that was not only from the wind. She had no place among them, these people who had birthed him, raised him, sent him away to be shaped by salt and steel. She had hoped, foolishly, for some thread of welcome, some glimpse of him in their faces, but she saw only suspicion, only the quiet retreat of shadowed figures behind shuttered doors. No hands reached to help. If they saw her at all, they pretended not to. Her fingers curled around the curve of her belly as she might shield the life within from the cold, from the indifference, from the sharp edges of this place that felt less and less like a haven and more like a place forgotten by kindness. A gust of wind shrieked through the narrow pass between the houses, driving rain into her face, stinging her skin like needles of ice. She gasped, blinking away the wet, her breath a sharp hitch in her throat. She could not stand here waiting for the welcome that would not come. Leif had told her where to go, the house on the precipice where the cliffs plunge sheer into the churning gray, where the wind never ceases its howling lament. There he said she would find the old woman, the one who had first drawn him from his mother's womb, and the one who had known him before he ever drew a breath. She set her jaw, her boots heavy against the mud-slick ground as she turned towards the path that led upward. It was steep, winding, treacherous in the dark. The sea roared below, an unrelenting chorus of hunger and pull, and she swore she could feel it reaching for her, beckoning with its white-capped fingers. Step by step, she pressed on, one hand braced against her belly, the other clinging to the jagged rocks that jutted out from the hillside. The wind fought her, tearing at her cloak, at her hair, as if it too wished to drag her backwards. She clenched her teeth, bent low, forced herself forward. Then, light, faint, flickering, barely more than a distant glow. Relief surged through her, weak and shuddering. Her vision blurred, whether from rain or exhaustion or something deeper, she didn't know. But she pushed forward, feet slipping on the wet stone, breath ragged in her throat. The light swayed, dim and uncertain. Or was it she who swayed? A hand against the door, fingers numb, fumbling, a breath and then another, steadier now. She knocked once, twice. A pause. The wind howled, carrying her prayer into the night. The door swung open before she could knock a third time, as if the wind itself had willed it. A woman stood there, old as the cliffs, her face carved deep with time, the lines of it more map than flesh, more story than skin. Her eyes, black as a crow's wings, sharp as flint, swept over her in a single glance, taking in the soaked cloak, the hollowed cheeks, the way her arms curled tight around her belly as if she alone could hold the child safe within. The woman did not ask her name, did not ask her purpose. The sea had already whispered it to her. The wind had carried the scent of birth and blood before the first step landed on her threshold. "Come," the woman said, voice like dried leaves crushed beneath a boot. "You have no time." Inside, the air was thick with the scent of herbs, dried stalks hanging from the rafters, their brittle bodies rustling as the wind forced its way through the cracks. The peat smoke curled low in the air, mingled with the damp musk of wool and deep-rooted scent of wood long soaked in the sea air. A fire smoldered in the hearth, not roaring but steady, its glow licking at the stone walls, casting the place half into shadow and half into flame. The old woman led her forward, her grip firm but not unkind, guiding her toward a bed of furs laid out by the fire. Her knees buckled before she could reach it. A sharp gasp escaped her lips, the pain twisting through her like a blade slipping between ribs. She braced herself against the woman's arms, her fingers clawing into the coarse fabric of her sleeve. "Leif sent me," she rasped, her words barely more than a breath, the weight of them pressing down as if speaking his name aloud might summon him from the dark. The woman did not flinch, did not pause, only nodded as if she had known this all along, as if she had been waiting for this very moment since the day she had brought Leif into the world. "I know," she muttered. A cool hand pressed into her forehead, calloused but certain, the touch of one who had seen the beginning and the end of many lives. A palm against her belly, reading the language of pain written beneath the skin. A flicker of something in the old woman's eyes, not fear, not doubt, but knowing. Another wave of pain crashed over her, worse this time, deeper, pulling her under like a riptide. The air tore from her lungs in a strangled cry. She folded forward, her nails digging into the furs beneath her, teeth clenched, breath coming in ragged gasps. The storm outside howled in answer. The wind slammed against the walls. The wooden beams groaned as if they too bore the weight of it. The old woman moved quickly now, pressing herbs into a cup with fingers that had done this 100 times before. She worked like a woman who had seen death come too swiftly, who knew the battle was not always fought with steel, but with breath and blood and will. A murmur, low, steady, not a prayer, not a plea, but something older, something woven into the fabric of birth and bone. The room narrowed to firelight and pain, to the press of hands upon her skin, to the world fracturing into nothing but the force of life tearing through her. Thunder rolled, deep and growling, as the waves below crashed against the cliffs, and the wind shrieked through the trees like the wailing of spirits. The storm raged, but inside, the battle was hers alone. And she would not yield, not yet, not until the child was free. The storm howled, a thing of rage and ruin, beating its fists against the walls, rattling the bones of the house as if they might tear it from the earth. The wind whistled through the eaves, a dirge for the dying, a herald for the living, and then a cry. Thin, piercing, raw as the first light breaking over the sea, a sound that cut through the dark, through the weight of death, pressing close, a thread of something untouched by the sorrow in the room. The child, a girl. The old woman lifted her, bloodied and slick, her tiny limbs curled tight against the cold. Steam rose from her skin in the firelight, life warring against the chill that had crept into the house, into the mother's bones. The storm rattled the door, bellowing its fury, but inside, for a moment, there was only the hush of the living and the dying. She reached out, hands trembling, fingers brushing the damp warmth of her daughter's skin. So small, so impossibly small. The weight of her, no more than a breath, yet heavy with everything. A legacy unspoken, a line unbroken. Leif's child, his blood, his fire, his strength waiting to unfold in the limbs still soft and eyes yet to open. She traced the curve of the girl's cheek, the impossibly delicate lips, lips that would one day speak, that would one day shape words, name stories. The world blurred at the edges, the warmth slipping from her limbs, the pull of the dark growing stronger. She tried to speak, to name her, to send her into the world with something of herself, something more than the blood in her veins, more than the sorrow in this moment. But her breath was failing, her lips parting soundlessly, her voice lost in the space between worlds where life and death brushed fingertips before parting. The old woman watched, silent, the knowledge of endings etched deep into the lines in her face. She had seen death before, met it in dark rooms, beneath open skies, and in the damp hushes of battlefields where the dying clung to the last threads of their unraveling fates. And she knew it came for kings and beggars alike. No ear for prayers, no patience for bargaining. But this was different. This was a severing and a forging, a breath stolen and another drawn, a thread cut and another pulled taut upon the loom. Outside, the wind howled, a keen thing rattling the walls as if the storm itself mourned. The fire in the hearth flickered, guttering low, casting long shadows upon the walls, shadows that stretched, that shifted, that seemed to bow in reverence to the moment. Then the child cried, not the frail, thin wail of a newly born, but something sharp, raw, unyielding, cutting through the storm with a force that did not beg for life but demanded it. The old woman felt the sound through the bones of the house, through the very air itself, as if the world had been holding its breath and now exhaled in answer. And then the thunder came. Not a distant murmur, not a rolling growl of a storm drifting beyond the cliff, but a shattering, sky-splitting roar, a crack that shook the earth beneath them, that rattled the rafters and sent the bundles of herbs trembling from the ceiling beams. The very walls seemed to shudder and groan, the wind shrieking in its wake as if the heavens had spoken. The old woman did not flinch. She had seen this before, once in a life long past, when men spoke of omens and women who bore kings into a world with blood and thunder. She had felt it before, in the stillness before a battle, in the hush before a great storm broke upon the land, in the moment before a name was spoken that would not be forgotten. Her black eyes fell to the child, to the small, writhing thing, to the fist curled tight as iron, to the lungs that carried the fire of life, of defiance, of something that would not be tamed. She nodded to herself. She will live. The old woman murmured, the storm has named her. She lifted the child, her voice rising firm as the cliffs, steady as the sea. Tora. The name rang through the dim firelight, carried on the wind, claimed not by the woman who had borne her, but by the world itself. Outside, the thunder rolled again, softer this time, distant, like the growling of something that had given its blessing and now withdrew satisfied. And upon the firs, her breath now stilled, the mother let go. And so she was named, not by her mother, not by a man, but by the storm itself. Tora, which in Norse means thunder. This is just the beginning of a story carved from ice, fire, and faith. It's a saga full of adventures where even the gods are questioned, where warriors rise and fall, where the girl born in silence might just change everything. I hope you were drawn in. I hope something stirred in you as you listened, because this trilogy will not only bring history to life, it will awaken something ancient in your spirit. If you want to hear more of Tora's story, leave a comment. You can leave a review. Tell me what you felt. And if you want to be among the first to read chapter 1, here's my offer. Just send an email to Viking Legacy and Lore @gmail.com, and I'll send you the first chapter to read and enjoy before anyone else gets a chance. Think about that legacy. This is just the beginning. Until next time, be bold, be strong, and awaken the Viking in you.